So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Leyla Ben Hamida. I'm the communication key expert with the EU-GCC Dialogue on Economic Diversification project, and I'm also a certified entrepreneurship coach. I'm going to moderate this discussion for you today. So today, the EU delegation and the German embassy to the UAE are happy to co-host the dialogue between EU and UAE on the artificial intelligence and the blockchain status and outlook. But first, let me welcome His Excellency, the Ambassador Andrea Matteo Fontana, head of the EU delegation to the UAE. Your Excellency.
Yes, Leyla, thank you very much. So what I wanted to say in this introduction, can you hear me well? Good. Is that, looking back, 2020 has been a very challenging year for all of us. While the world was experiencing one of the deadliest and most severe pandemics in over a century. And in response to that, we had to adapt in our lives, in our work, in the way children go to schools and businesses and government could respond to the pandemic. But if we look back, we realize that in some way we were lucky that this didn't happen 20 or 30 years ago when digital applications were not available, when digital technologies would not have let us remain in contact with people remotely, would not have allowed people to continue working during lockdowns, and would have not allowed government to assist the citizens at a distance. So for me, the lessons from this crisis on the digital side is that digital technologies have emerged as a new pillar in our economies, in our societies, in responding to new realities in our lives. And in a way, COVID has pressed fast forward on a trend towards digital transformation, what we call now in Europe the digital decade. And in order to respond to this new reality, the European Union has launched, through our Next Generation EU program, a European recovery instrument, which will provide an investment of over 150 billion euro for digital technologies. And I think that this investment will be very important in the way we shape the new economy in Europe. What is also important, and what I think we'll also discuss today, is the regulation of these technologies. And as you know, Europe yesterday has launched two new acts, the Digital Services Act and the Digital Market Act, which will ensure that in this new digital world, customers will have access to safe products and services online, and businesses will compete in a free and fair way on all the digital platforms. And I think this will be very important as we move on to make sure that the investment that Europe is putting into the digital sector will also be properly regulated by companies working in this sector. Today, in this seminar, we will discuss artificial intelligence and we will discuss the blockchain. And these are two technologies that, as we know, are very important in the UAE, where they will play an important role in the digital transformation of the country and of the economy. And that's also why we have chosen these two issues of blockchain and artificial intelligence as two main topics in our participation as EU in Expo 2020 Dubai, where there will be events dedicated to these two issues that we will discuss today in more details. So let me finish this introduction by saying that, first of all, I'm delighted to see all the participants and welcome all the participants from Europe and from the UAE who will be speaking about these two important issues today. And finally, to say that for me, this is the beginning of a, I hope, stronger collaboration with our Emirati friends in the run-up to Expo 2020 and beyond. Thank you very much. Leyla, over to you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now I'm happy to welcome His Excellency, the Ambassador of the German Embassy to the UAE, Ambassador Ernst Peter Fischer. To you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leyla. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to join you and to co-host this together with my friend, the ambassador of the EU, Andrea. I'm the German ambassador, which means that by chance, this past half year, Germany has also been holding the presidency of the European Union. And as a good German diplomat, I am also a convinced European. It's not only a matter of reason, but also a matter of heart and passion to me, and I dare say to most of my countrymen. For the past 6 months, we've put on a number of events together with the European Union delegation on a number of topics where the UAE is a leader. We talked about climate change, we talked about agriculture, we talked about the geopolitics in this region, and today artificial intelligence and blockchain. And I say the UAE is a leader. The UAE is a leader in this region and in many areas in the world. And therefore, I see a lot of potential to deepen our partnership with the UAE, not only for the UAE's sake, not only for the market of the UAE, but the UAE is a platform for this region, which is our neighbor, and beyond this region, to the wider region, and in many areas to the world. And in AI and blockchain, I think that can be the case. So I want to just tell you 2 very brief anecdotes that demonstrate why I'm so impressed. And I want to raise 2 specific initiatives to bring them to your attention. The anecdotes are, I'll keep them short. We had a delegation here from the German Parliament, the Commission on the Digital Agenda from our Parliament cross-party group. And they had a very good meeting with His Excellency, the Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence, Minister Al-Ulama. And they said, why does the UAE have a Minister for Artificial Intelligence? I mean, we don't. Why do you? Interesting question, right? And he said, that's easy. In the 15th century, a German invented the printing press, Gutenberg. And the Arab world missed that development. It caused us to fall behind for a certain time. We think AI is a development as significant and as bringing about as much change as the printing press. And this time, we don't want to fall behind. On the contrary, we want to be at the front of this development. And if you want to be at the front of a development, you might as well appoint a minister. Wow, the Germans said, very impressive. And then I heard from a very high-ranking Emirati, and I won't say his name because he might not wish me to quote this. He said, for AI, he said, you Germans, but let's imagine he meant us, all of us Europeans, you're our perfect partner. The Americans, it's too much to the market. Things can go crazy. And the Chinese, it's all the state, it's all the party. And you guys, you balance the market and responsibility. So really, you're the ideal partner. So that's why I see a lot of untapped potential. And I hope this seminar is a contribution to achieving the great complementarity that exists. The 2 initiatives I wanted to mention, one aspect of digitalization in AI is the 4th industrial revolution. There's a great complementarity between the UAE strategy and what we have to offer in Germany and the EU. And that's why we founded here an Emirati German task force on 4IR. And all the preparatory work has been done. On 22nd of December, we're going to have a kickoff. We have the blessing of His Excellency, the Minister for Industry and Advanced Technology, Dr. Sultan. And joining us for the meeting will be Her Excellency Sarah Al-Amiri, the Minister for Higher Technology. I'm saying most of this for the benefit, with the hope of attracting the attention of Ms. Mariam, who's joining us today, because I know that's her field. So I'd like to be in touch with you about this. Final point, they have here in the UAE a University for Artificial Intelligence called Mohammed bin Zayed University for Artificial Intelligence. And a lot of Emiratis have said, Where's the European participation in our university? Where are the professors, the universities that want to cooperate? So I think that's an attractive opportunity. And if any of the participants knows of anyone who should be involved with this university, please reach out to me. So I wish you a good, productive seminar, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Well, blockchain and artificial intelligence indeed are two of the hottest technology trends right now. Even though the two technologies have highly different development parties and applications, researchers have been discussing and exploring their combination. It goes without saying that each technology has its own individual degree of complexity, but both AI and blockchain are in situations where they can benefit from each other. With both these technologies able to affect and enact upon data in different ways, their coming together makes sense, and it can take the exploitation of data to a new level. At the same time, the integration of machine learning and AI into blockchain and vice versa can raise several questions on the future of these two technologies in both EU and UAE, or which regulatory approaches are most appropriate, areas of cooperation between both territories, EU and UAE, and so forth. To enhance this dialogue, experts have been invited from both territories. So please welcome Mr. Abdelrahman Al-Mahmoud, Head of Infrastructure and Research at the UAE AI Office. Mr. Eric Badiqué, Advisor for Artificial Intelligence from the European Commission. Mr. Daniel Abbou, CEO of Germany's Federal Association for Artificial Intelligence. Mrs. Mariam Muhairi, Head of Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, UAE, as well as Dubai Future Foundation. Mr. Andreas Hartl, Head of Division AI at the Germany's Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. Mr. Pēteris Zilgalvis, Head of Unit for Digital Innovation and Blockchain, and co-chair of the European Commission FinTech Task Force. Last but not least, Mr. Abdelqader, Chief Executive Officer of Smartworld. So, following the speaker's presentation, a Q&A session is scheduled. I encourage you to use as much as you can the box of the QA, which appears at the bottom in the middle of the screen. Without further introduction, I give the floor to Dr. Abdelrahman Al-Mahmoud.
Thank you, Your Excellencies. Thank you. I'd like to thank the organizing panel for inviting me to this great event. So I'll be talking about the UAE AI strategy and our journey, basically, in AI. Now, the UAE AI strategy was launched in 2017 with the goal of having the UAE to be a leader in AI by 2031. This includes being a leader in adopting AI, developing AI, really being a hub for AI. So throughout this journey, we went through, I would call it 3 main phases that really outlines the development of AI in the UAE and in the government. The first phase, when we started out, we realized that there are a lot of startups, a lot of companies that are operating in AI in the UAE already. So our first goal was to understand the landscape on what is happening in this domain in the UAE. So we launched a wide survey. We understood what type of companies are operating in this domain. And we have now a very good understanding of the type of companies that are working in this domain and their activities. Now, this includes also the pain points that they face, the challenges that they have to go through. What are the areas that we could support them? And this is crucial and critical for what comes next to support them through regulations. Throughout the first phase, we started training programs. We trained thousands of students on AI, including students from very young ages up to government level employees. We have the AI program that trained over 160 government employees and is now entering the 3rd cohort. Now, this program proved to be one of the most useful things that we did, which was basically taking government employees, mid to high level, and putting them through an intensive technical program on AI. Upon graduating, they become our AI champions. They go back to their main entities, back to their government entities, and they become our AI champions in those entities. This approach proved to be most useful because they are the ones that understand their business the best. Right? It helps us to bring change from within. So that was one of the most impactful initiatives that we had. Moving on to the second phase, we then started pushing the adoption of AI. We had a large number of, we supported a large number of entities to take forward their proof of concepts, ideate new ideas on how this technology can support them, the best areas of application, learn from the best practices globally. So we had basically a wide number of proof of concepts that came out of this phase. Now, throughout this phase, there was a lot of demand for developing new solutions. This takes us to the third phase. Now, in the third phase, we looked at the full deployment of AI. So now, moving from proof of concepts to full-on deployment of AI. So this includes deploying AI from A to Z. So we picked a number of strategic projects that are very relevant to us in the UAE, the medical sector, logistics, even wildlife protection. And we started assembling strategic partners, and we are still in the process of doing that. These partners will support us to take these solutions from A to Z. This includes research entities, government entities, startups. So we're bringing them all together. Now, during the first phase, we faced COVID, and it would not be right to talk about AI without actually mentioning COVID and the efforts that we had tackling the COVID pandemic. In fact, one of the funniest stories that actually came to mind when this COVID situation started was pre-COVID, one of the most talked about ethical issues of AI was that it's going to substitute our jobs, right? So it's going to take over a lot of the day-to-day procedures that would affect people's jobs. Now, going through COVID and basically AI showing that it's one of the key enablers for people to go back to work. It showed that AI is protecting our jobs, in fact, right? It's helping put people back to their offices. So the perception of AI shifted in this direction. The adoption became faster. People and government entities were eager to actually utilize these technologies to combat the pandemic. Now, we are running a number of large projects on AI, and that comes with the need for resources, right? So training these algorithms, building these systems takes up a lot of computational power. In fact, recently we announced the largest supercomputer in the government, which is basically built to support the AI ecosystems. So now we have people that are trained on AI. We have projects that are growing in AI. We are aiming to support this ecosystem with the right tools, right? Giving them the best solution to basically develop the algorithms and make it a reality. In fact, it's not just the largest supercomputer in the government. We're also aiming to make it the most accessible, and that any researcher in the UAE, any private entity, any startup that is willing to develop new state-of-the-art algorithms, train their algorithms, will be able to get access to this supercomputer. So it is for everybody. Of course, we are going ahead beyond. It's a long-term vision. We have universities that are starting, Mohammed bin Zayed University for AI, that is dedicated to basically graduate the best experts in AI, hopefully soon. So to sum it up, that is our journey throughout the government and adopting AI, and hopefully we will be there soon.
Thank you so much. May I ask you to switch on your cameras for a group photo, please? Arman, is it okay?
Yes, that's fine. Already Mr. Kramer wasn't there. Okay, good.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Eric, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Not yet. Now, yes.
Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation to this event. Very interesting, very timely, I believe. And also thank you for the introduction. And I share a lot of the comments that were already made by Mr. Ambassadors, also on the importance of the cooperation with the UAE on AI. And I'll come to this a bit in some of my comments. So very, very few slides. I don't want to take too much time, but just to say that just as the previous speaker explained the approach for the UAE on the strategy for AI, we have also in Europe, we've launched a strategy on AI about 2 years ago. And basically there are two legs. So I think it's quite important to make the difference, or to say we are covering both a strategy for investment, a strategy for excellence at European level. And we're also pushing very strongly, I believe, a strategy for trustworthy AI. So for guidelines, ethical guidelines, for possibly a regulation on AI. So on the first leg, this is the purpose of this slide here. We have, of course, quite a detailed strategy with a number of tools that are the usual tools in Europe. Well, first we have a specificity of being Europe, so 27 member states. We need to coordinate them, so we have what we call a coordinated plan. We meet with them regularly, 3-4 times a year, to align on approaches for research, for investment, to do things together, to share ideas on regulation and so on. What we also want to do is to support a number of excellence and testing centers, because we believe a lot of testing needs to be done for AI. So this is also an important part of a new program that we are launching, which will be called Digital Europe. Networking universities, helping to build some hubs, some innovation hubs. And here there is a very strong regional dimension, of course. We want to build a Europe that is cohesive and where we have access to the best technology, even in the remote corners of Europe, if I may say. So that's also a very important agenda. Finding investment. And here, my colleague who is here can also talk about this, because he's responsible for this part of our activity in DigiConnect. And of course, building some public-private partnerships, which is an important part, and making sure that we as public sector also adopt AI early, as was also mentioned by other speakers. So the second leg, which is perhaps of more interest in the current discussion, is how can we promote an ecosystem of trust, and this is throughout Europe, but also I believe, and I have a question in the poll that I suggested. We need to also have an approach that is inclusive and that is broader than just Europe. I mean, AI is of concern to everybody around the world. So we are also looking for a way to align approaches around the world, to have as much as possible a level playing field. So here we talk about an ecosystem of trust. We talk about possibly regulating some high-risk applications. And we have made some proposals we are preparing proposals for the first part of 2021 in this direction. So there are still a number of options, of course, on how this could be implemented, whether we would be talking about some kind of hard regulation for high-risk systems, or whether we would apply some voluntary systems for other types of applications. So all the options are still on the table, but we are working on this very hard. We had what we call a white paper, so with some ideas that was published and for which we had a big consultation. I'll come to that. And what we are talking about here is to have possible requirements in terms of training data. So making sure we don't have biases, for example, requirements in terms of record keeping, information about the system robustness, so making sure that we have systems that are robust and that will respect a number of rules, and of course on human oversight. So these are the different dimensions that we have mentioned in the white paper. So is this, do we need to do something? And that's a question I also have in the poll. I don't know if we'll be able to launch it, and I'll be interested in the answer. But one question is, of course, do we need to do more than we have today in terms of legislation, in terms of having a frame around AI? From the consultation that we launched, the answer is yes. We have like 32% saying your current legislation may have some gaps. There is a need for new legislation, 42%. So this is, we believe, a good, a solid ground to go further into developing such a framework.
Mr. Eric?
Yes.
We just launched the poll.
Yes, I saw it, but I had to. It's kind of interfering with my screen. I'm going to finish my short presentation first. So last slide. As a simply next step. Oh yeah, let me see. What does the poll say? Should AI-based product services be subject to specific rules? Yes, 95%. So I think this is good. This confirms what I have in my slide coming from our consultation. What should be the objective of international cooperation? 15% exchange of information only. Agreement on principles, 35%. Common standard certification scheme, 50%. I would say this is very interesting, promising, and perhaps setting the stage for further discussion on how we should achieve this. So I'll finish here. So next steps is, of course, we are now working hard on what we call an impact assessment. So trying to see if we launch such measures, what will be the impact? Is it worth it? Where should we act? And then on that basis, we'll come out next year, early next year, with a revised coordinated plan and with a proposed regulatory framework that will apply to Europe. But of course, we're interested in discussing and exchanging ideas with other countries, and in particular with UAE. And I look forward to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eric. I invite Dr. Daniel Abbou.
Yes, hello everyone. First of all, not a doctor. And second, I'm Daniel Abbou, the General Manager of the German AI Association. I'm very happy and very honored to be here with you. I will share one of the most told sentences in the last year. I will share my screen now with you. I hope it will work. 1 second, please. Et voilà. So Zoom is, sorry, that was the wrong one. Presentation. So I think you should see the slides now. And this is just a small presentation about the German AI Association. We represent 260, well, to be completely honest, it's 272 innovative SME startups and experts. And you can't join the German AI Association when you have not a focus on the development and application of AI technology. You have to have a focus on there. And so for that, we are Germany's largest AI entrepreneur network. Of course, we are a political voice. We're in steady contact with Mr. Hartl, but of course with Mr. Groß from the European Commission and other policymakers. But we want also to be enablers and connectors and also to drive innovation in Germany. We deeply believe as a German AI association in the digital sovereignty in Europe. We don't have any, and it's not because we're anti-American or anything like that, but we don't have any American or Chinese money in our association. That what we want is to be a German and European voice in AI, and we are very proud of that. Of course, we want to strengthen the AI ecosystem and the openness and the innovativeness to AI in Europe and Germany. We have working groups there. So our entrepreneurs are engaging themselves into this association. So we don't have like 200 people working for the association full-time. Our main objective is to integrate the knowledge of the entrepreneurs into our association. So we have the data privacy, ethics, big subject, sustainability. I can't tell you how engaged young entrepreneurs are in the point of sustainability and AI. It's our most active group with the most interesting ideas we can provide there. Industry, mobility, retail, and health are also very well-working groups, and especially the health sector and the retail sector in 2020 got a large surge about it. So where is the German AI ecosystem standing from our point of view? Germany is very, very strong in AI research. So the number of scientific papers, of course, China is number one, but Europe itself, number two, and Germany is also very strong in the number of scientific papers on the topic of AI in the last 10 years. And we have a world-class traditional industry. I think this is quite well known, but the German industry, interestingly, is not investing enough in AI. Only 6% of German SMEs are using AI tools at the moment. This was a big study from a partner association in Germany, only 6%. So our German AI companies are seeking clients. We have strongly motivated AI entrepreneurs and companies who want to do business with you also in the UAE and in the whole region. They are motivated, they are well educated, and they have very classical and very innovative AI products. And 3 or 4 AI startups are already cooperating with established companies. So to be honest, I think the point is that especially in the business-to-business case, Germany and European AI is very strong. I would say the B2C, well, I wouldn't say the ship has left the harbor on that, but I would say we should concentrate. And I think I'm citing Mrs. Verstager there also, that B2B is one of the core points where European AI can be established. And what I'm personally very proud of is that we are building a European AI ecosystem, and for that we have very friendly relations and trying to get even more closer with as the KI Bundesverband, so the German AI Association. So we cooperate very closely with Hub France IA, Crow AI, the Croatian AI Association, AI Austria and AI for SI is Slovenia, who will take the reign in the European presidency mid-21, and AI Bulgaria. And we are also in talks with AI Sweden and the Netherlands to build a real European AI ecosystem on the point of associations. And we are very, very proud that last week we had our European AI Forum, that for the first time ever, 6 national associations made joint recommendations for AI regulations in the European Union. And this will be also transmit on Brussels. And I think what is very important to say to this is that we really try to have a realistic outlook on AI in Europe, and we want to commend the European Union in having points of regulation. And what we just saw with Mr. Badiqué, who in his presentation, that there are certain areas of AI that can be regulated in the high risk factor. But there are also voices, I'm not saying that from the European Commission, but they're saying you have to regulate AI itself, Well, in this case, people who are propagating this, I wish bon voyage. Has with high risk potential, I would completely agree. Just to shorten it out, last week, our European AI Forum, it's the second time we made that. And as you can see, high-ranking commissioners and vice presidents, but also German president, ministers like Mr. Spahn and Mrs. Karliczek attended on that. So, and that was it from my side. My name is Daniel Abbou, my colleague Vanessa Can. And if you have any questions and feedback, we are happy to provide it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Abbou. Actually, we do have questions, but if you don't mind, we'll have the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. So now let's welcome Mrs. Mariam Al-Muhairi.
Thank you, Leyla, and thank you again for this opportunity and to be a part of this dialogue. So I'm going to share my screen as well. And just walk you through briefly what we do at the center, and then an example of the work that we've done actually within AI. So just for a moment. Okay, can everyone see the screen? I feel like that is the line of this year. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great.
Yes.
So
whenever you want to launch the poll, please feel free. Okay.
Sure. So the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which I lead, is a collaboration between the World Economic Forum and the Dubai Future Foundation. We are the first affiliate center in the Gulf region and the first in the WEF network. We are relatively new. We launched last year in January 2019, and we are a federal initiative, so we work across all 7 Emirates. The Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution Network is part of the World Economic Forum's kind of mission to exchange and share knowledge around 4IR. And I think it's very fitting that we're having this discussion, especially with the EU and Germany, because as many probably know, 4IR in a way originated from Industry 4.0 in Germany. So I think there's a lot that we can learn definitely from this dialogue and this collaboration. At the moment, we focus on 3 main areas: blockchain, which I know colleagues will talk about later on, AI, and then precision medicine. And for each of the portfolios, we develop what we call governance frameworks. So it's basically like white papers or policies. And then we trial them with the relevant entities. And a lot of that's done also with international entities, companies, governments that are working on similar work or similar ideas. So an example of something that we've been working around in AI is the work we did around procurement. And I think it's quite interesting because it relates to actually a lot of the discussions that my colleagues have been having here on within the dialogue as well. And that's around kind of regulation versus market versus, how much regulation do we need? How much freedom should we allow or not allow? So what this project was actually working with the UK government to develop guidelines for procuring AI. And the main reason for this was we found that a number of entities that were trying to have AI within the public sector, so this was a public sector project, weren't really aware of what artificial intelligence was. They didn't really understand what the categories were. And when they were acquiring this technology, they were using kind of outdated systems or outdated procurement processes or traditional procurement processes for things like a MacBook, and then using it for something with an AI. So this is what we were trying to kind of solve as a challenge. This is an example of what the guidelines were. So there were 10 of them, and they were pretty, I think, self-explanatory things like ensuring that you're articulating the right technical and administrative feasibilities in terms of accessing data. Ensuring that you focus on mechanisms of algorithmic accountability, transparency norms. Number 7, for example, work with a diverse multidisciplinary team. These were quite kind of simple, I think, or more, let's say, universal or abstract points. But the point of this was really to have kind of something that procurement officers could revert back to when they were thinking about their procurement processes, particularly in relation to AI. And we did this as a trial with the Dubai Electricity and Water Authority here in Dubai. And the reason that DEWA was chosen, so that's the acronym, was because they have quite high maturity in AI. And they had already done a few projects where they had procured AI using, again, a process that was slightly, let's say, outdated or traditional. So the trial started as a workshop. What that was bringing together all the relevant entities, so that included the actual vendors that DEWA worked with. So we weren't just trying to focus on the procurement officers, but also focus on the companies that would be applying for this tender. And the timeline that initially was brought up in terms of the procurement process was something that was about 6 months. Of course, with things like AI and emerging technology, these are things that are constantly changing. So 6 months is a very long, let's say, timeline. And so it was dealing with challenges like that. And also, as I mentioned, dealing with challenges like the procurement officials were not aware of what they were really trying to procure. And there was no kind of assessment post receiving the tender, receiving the RFP on what to assess the companies on. So the main feedback that we got on this once we did this project was that there need to be a clear definition of what AI is. And to this day, I'm not sure if there is one. I think that a number of places define it as different things, and a clear categorization of what falls under that. There is also, what we found out is that there needs to be a lot more focus on training and upskilling. So instead of completely bringing in a new team, these procurement officials who are already in place, who understand the organization, just need to kind of be upskilled to understand these new technologies that they're working with. One of the arguments, and I'd love to hear what other colleagues think, that we had was whether we should have a list of pre-approved suppliers. So should we have companies that were already approved, that we already had vetted, and only those could apply, or should we open it up to market? And I still think this is a discussion that we can definitely have. And again, clear evaluation criteria and clear, I think, policies and kind of regulations around what we do with data and what data is considered our data versus company data, but also dealing with laws around data residency, for example, which is something that we think about here in the UAE. So this is just an example of some of the work we've done in AI, kind of in a nutshell. It was also a very short presentation, but I think what it's shown for us is that collaboration has been very key in the way that we approach policymaking, and that there's a lot more for us to kind of learn in this field. And we'd love to do that with kind of people on this call and anyone else who's interested in collaborating. So thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. And now I would welcome Mr. Andreas Hartl.
Yes, Leyla, shukran and merhaba to everyone here in the call. It's really a pleasure for me to be here and to talk about not only the German AI strategy, but also blockchain. So thanks for having me. It's really a great task to integrate both AI and blockchain, and the division I'm heading actually is doing this, not only through strategies, but also through every kind of cooperation and collaboration. And I think that both technologies are really key technologies for a data-driven digital economy, which is, I think, very important for every government at the moment in the world. Now, just shortly, and I think especially Abbou told you already a lot about the situation in Germany. I can subscribe to almost everything about that. It's hard to identify what I would not subscribe to. But however, so our strategy was conducted a bit later than the strategy of the UAE in 2018. But we had an update 2 weeks ago. The government announced in 2018 to invest another 3 billion euros. And this year, on the basis of the economic stimulus and future package to fight the pandemic, there was the commitment to invest another 2 billion euros, so 5 billion euros extra spending on specifically AI. Of course, the government spent for years technology neutral into every kind of digital technology, but this is really fresh money only in AI. Now, the German narrative is, we know how to make AI, but we're not doing enough. Just what Daniel Abbou just said. And maybe to reflect what Mr. Abdelrahman Mahmoud said, we also are looking for professors. So when you have professors for us, please send them to Germany. The Ministry for Education Research will set up 100 new professorships. And I think at the moment 20 are filled with really excellent people from all over the world. So there is really a tough competition for the brightest minds in the world on AI. Now, of course, I'm representing the Ministry for Economic Affairs. So for us and for my minister, Peter Altmaier, who, by the way, has really, I think, a very close exchange with Minister Al-Jaber. As far as I know, they meet and talk to each other very regularly. So we're also looking forward to intensifying our cooperation and collaboration. Transfer is key. And one major flagship initiative we took is Gaia X. Maybe you have heard about this. It's not duplicating what Amazon with AWS is doing, or Google or Microsoft with Azure. It's trying to set up, in my words, the next generation of hyperscalers, of an AI ecosystem. And we're really happy that a lot of companies are onboarding, and that many companies now set up and established a company in Brussels, in Belgium, to run the operations. So it will be a secure and trustworthy data infrastructure, but also a data ecosystem for the economy, not only storage, but also services, especially for small and medium-sized companies. They will have this marketplace, this forum, Gaia X, to provide their services in a larger ecosystem. We are also investing in a new agency for breakthrough innovations or disruptive innovations. This agency is currently establishing itself. And what also is one of the key aspects of our strategy is the support of sandboxes, because we think that not only technology and businesses need to be tested, but also regulatory approaches. And I think we are in line with what Eric Badiqué said from the Commission on, to bring forward the regulatory debate. So at the core really is the support of SMEs, as I indicated. And one really very successful instrument we started is what we call the AI coaches or AI trainers. Now we have 26 regionally competence centers for the digital transformation of SMEs. And at the moment, we have more than 50 AI trainers nationwide that have direct contact with SMEs and trying to help them to analyze, to evaluate the potential of AI for their specific business model. And not only the products, but also the processes can be improved with AI. Just quickly, of course, startups are very essential for a fresh, for an innovative, for a modern economy. And we doubled the spending into our program Exist, which helps people from academia, postgraduates to start their own business. We extended our German accelerator program in international hubs like the Bay Area, Boston, but also Singapore. And we're trying to innovate our procurement system so that startups have better chances, better odds when they're trying to compete for public commissions. And what I would really also like to mention is the international cooperation and standardization. 2 weeks ago, we had the large digital summit, the first time in a virtual format, but however, my minister invited many stakeholders, and also our federal chancellor, Angela Merkel, attended. And what was presented there is an AI standardization roadmap. And we are now implementing this roadmap together with partners from the industry to identify fields of action for standardization. And of course, that can be scaled up and is to be scaled up on a European, but also on an international level. We want to bring forward the standardization debate. And just another aspect I would like to mention in that respect is 2 weeks ago, there was the first ministerial council of the Global Partnership on AI. It's an initiative taken in the G7 group, and French President Macron and the Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau welcomed the global world to that first summit in Montreal, also a virtual format. And we're really looking forward to extending the membership all over the world, and we want that GPAI will be the primary, the most important global AI forum. So I can really skip my words on the AI strategy and the debate on the European level. I think Eric Badiqué said everything that is important. What I would like to do also with a twist to blockchain is that I think we see this year the rise of data. Also, the AI debate is becoming more and more a debate on data. And that is quite clear. It's not only computing power, what was mentioned by Mr. Al-Mahmoud, but it's more and more the volume and the quality of data that is especially important for machine learning. That is, at least in Germany and Europe, is pushing forward the debate. The European Union introduced their data strategy in February. We have now the first legislative proposals for a data governance act, a digital markets act, a digital services act, which is highly debated at the moment. We have an open data directive, and we're talking about identifying high value data sets from the public sector that has to be provided without costs by an API in a machine readable way. Very important issues, and we are currently working on a national data strategy, and I think in the beginning of next year we will present that to the public. So now data and blockchain. And I hope I will give some great ideas that Pēteris can go a bit deeper. Well, our understanding is that AI, data, blockchain is a perfect match. Blockchain can be served as an origin of trust, which is very important when it comes to the quality of data. And we have one really great example of many companies, but one I would like to highlight is Innoplexus. They are working with pharmaceutical data. They are pushing forward the innovation and research process with pharmaceutical products, and they are using both, and they are using AI for dealing with a lot of details, a lot of information in those graphs, and they are using blockchain to make clear which data has been used by which party, when, to what extent. So really a great match on the potential of both technologies. We set up a national strategy in 2019. It's the first comprehensive encompassing strategy on blockchain. I think Australia now also has a blockchain strategy from the government. Our strategy is a learning strategy, and it clearly has a focus on the economy, on industrial uptake, but also on public administration services. And we are really very glad that 2 years ago, we signed the European Blockchain Partnership. We are investing a lot into the European blockchain services infrastructure and the use cases there. And I think, Leyla, this will be a perfect handover to Pēteris Zilgalvis. Thank you very much. Looking forward to the questions. Shukran.
Indeed. Thank you so much. So the floor is for you, Mr. Pēteris Zilgalvis.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And I have quite an act to follow after these very interesting presentations, but there's definitely, I think, something I can pick up on that was in all of them. I'll perhaps start from the end and then go to the start, because the end is one that is very closely connected with the venue for today's discussion, and that will be the Dubai 2020, the Expo 2020 event, where we're planning to have a global blockchain roundtable. And in line with what Andreas and also earlier speakers have said, we see the emerging technologies, the converging technologies as being very much a part of a convergence stack. Blockchain, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence coming together. This was the title of our World Blockchain Congress, together with the International Association of Trusted Blockchain Applications last year in November. And the follow-up was intended to be at Expo 2020 already. And now, due to the events that we all know with the pandemic, will be next year. And very much looking at the way, how can we enable a data economy, a data society, utilizing the trust that blockchain gives and possible decentralized management of data in order to feed the quality data for artificial intelligence and other economic and citizens' needs. So that's where we want to end up at the high level, discussing, of course, with our colleagues, our friends in the United Arab Emirates, among other regions in the world. And now going a little bit to the start on our blockchain initiative. We start with a global vision of collecting and working on the basis of evidence and knowledge. And then this is the EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum. Especially in these times, the workshops are always open, but when they're in Brussels or Vienna, it's perhaps more difficult from people elsewhere in the world to travel there. But now the workshops are all online. We had one recently on supply chain in the agro-food sector. We had one on central bank digital currencies with the Bank of Japan, the Bank of Canada, as well as the European Central Bank. We have one coming up at the end of January, which will also be global, with Singapore, with the United States, others participating also as speakers on the markets in crypto assets, which is one of our legislative proposals to set up a legal framework for the digital assets, for the crypto assets. So this is a knowledge base, again, open. All the workshops are available to you, the reports on EID and blockchain, the converging technologies, issues on the legal area with smart contracts and blockchain legal frameworks as such, all available to all the listeners. Just go to EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum. We move from having the knowledge and an evidence base to action. This is the European Blockchain Partnership of 29 countries. All 27 EU member states signed up to a declaration at ministerial level, and now we're building together a European blockchain services infrastructure, deploying, not piloting. We're moving next year on self-sovereign identity, on audit document certification and publication, on RegTech, regulatory reporting, and also on diplomas certification and authentication across borders, with use cases coming up on small and medium enterprise finance, as well as on European Social Security number and asylum procedures. Obviously, this infrastructure will make use in the future. First, it has to work on the things that it is aiming to do first to deploy, but will aim to work with the collaboration of other technologies eventually, such as artificial intelligence, IoT, and is open as well, it's stated in the declaration, for a public-private partnership. We also work with the stakeholders right now, the International Association of Trusted Blockchain Applications, where I mentioned, we're in the Governmental Advisory Board. The association is run by blockchain stakeholders. It's a global association. Companies, enterprises in the United Arab Emirates are very welcome to join, and the Emirates are welcome to join the World Bank, the European Central Bank, Canada, others in the Governmental Advisory Board. If you have interest, please feel free to contact me, or for the stakeholders to contact INATBA directly. I mentioned a little bit the legal frameworks because we have an ambition to provide better public services where justified with blockchain. We like it especially where you need to decentralize management of a transaction, a set of transactions, or of data, because it reflects the multi-level governance of the EU. We don't have a center, a single silo of data or anything else in Brussels or in any other place in Europe. We have the different levels, the member states, the cities, the regions, all working together. And we think and we want the European blockchain services infrastructure to support this. We are starting some international cooperation with Canada, Australia, possibly Japan. We can explore it with the United Arab Emirates. I do always have to be cautious because, as I said, we have to prove our credibility by deploying. So our emphasis of our not unlimited resources is on deploying these use cases, but we definitely see this as a global technology, and we want to work globally with our like-minded partners. And we're hearing again and again today that we are thinking in a similar way about AI, about data, about the importance of the individual and making sure that he or she is at the center of a holistic vision. We support this with research calls for next generation internet coming up, a more efficient but more decentralized internet, not controlled by gatekeepers. You may have heard about the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act yesterday, which is adopted by the Commission and is going to the European Parliament and the member states for negotiation and eventual adoption. The technologies we're talking about today can be a way to implement the spirit and the goals of this decentralized, citizen-centered internet and processes that, again, put the individual at the center of a holistic vision, more efficient, but also more democratic. Finalizing, we do work in standardization in the, at the international level, ISO Technical Committee 307, with all the nations of the world who are represented there. The European Commission, my unit represents the European Commission there. And we intend as well to achieve standards that ensure interoperability, but leave a lot of space for innovation and don't in any way promote lock-in or more precisely prevent lock-in. The other legal framework that I mentioned, because we want the private ecosystem to flourish and the EU to be a great place continuing to welcome investment and also initiatives from abroad and open market, is the markets in crypto assets, along with the pilot, which is a regulatory sandbox plus for utilizing distributed ledger technologies in areas where you would not need, for market infrastructures, this is financial markets, you would not need a centralized securities depository. You don't need this single point of failure or single central entity. The distributed ledger technology could apply to this market infrastructure in a decentralized way. So again, we're exploring ways that innovation, disruptive innovation, can make our economies more competitive, the lives of our citizens better. And that's perhaps my final point, just finishing again with, we definitely see this as a conversation, a dialogue that will not finish, but that will perhaps reach fruition at Expo 2020 in 2021, I guess now. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. And now I welcome Mr. Abdelqader. You're muted.
Well, I'm just sharing my short presentation, so hopefully you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think the one thing I really would like, I think you all were talking about a lot of the high level. I'm going to go from a more of a practical, what we have done and what we see it. Smartworld, just to let you know, is really a joint venture between Dubai Aviation City Corporation and Etisalat. For the one who do not know, Etisalat is the leading telecom operator in here. In line of the vision of our ruler, really, and we've taken two themes there. One is to make sure that at the level of the federal, we have a vision of making sure that transaction, which we need to make sure that they're actually secure. 50% of that should be by mid of 21 on the blockchain. And the other thing is, one of the really the 50-year charter that we have is that for every citizen in the UAE, they would like to make sure that all of their educational credentials are actually located in a central place for that. Having those two really themes, we've come up in Smartworld with a product which we call Shahada. Shahada is based on blockchain, and I don't want to really go through a lot of it, but if you don't mind, I'll show a very short film that will actually give you a very small a total glance of what Shahada is all about, and then I will come back to you. It'll all take about a minute and a half.
Think about all of the years you've spent in school, all of the achievements, all of the certificates, and most of all, the diplomas. Isn't it strange that someone's life work is saved and represented on delicate pieces of paper? Pieces of paper that you have to take care of, keep track of, and protect forever? Most of the time, you even have to get these pieces of paper notarized and attested to prove they are authentic. Why are we still doing this? Introducing Shahada, the digital future for all paper-based certificates. Here, education institutions, employers, and government entities use Shahada to create digital records for all credentials. These digital records are then saved to each person's online safe, where they can access it anytime, anywhere in the world. Shahada utilizes a blockchain ecosystem, meaning the files are secure forever and cannot be counterfeited. This means attestation is digital and verification is seamless. Any entity aligned with the platform can publish records, credentials, transcripts, and even work experience. Integrated with UAE Pass, Shahada will take us one step closer to creating a complete UAE national digital identity. Shahada, secure, verified, forever.
Now, really, the product, which is what I call, we are very proud of being made and developed in the UAE. When we looked into it, one of the things that we've noticed is so important to make sure that the interface is there. Today, we all know the one thing that's important to all of us is security. When I talk about security, I do not really need to try to see how important that is. I would dare any person today go to work almost anywhere in the world. They could probably leave their wallet behind, but they will not dare leave their telephone behind. They cannot. Almost all of us are so attached to it. But the one thing we need to try to make sure that when you're using this technology, the one aspect of it which is so important to all of us is to make sure it is secure. Because security is not important for an individual or a person or a company, but also for the country. So we thought by utilizing this technology, we can really make people's life really happy. And that's what we're trying to do. The vision of our leaders in here to trying to make people more happier than anything else. And the use of technology as a tool to make them more happy. So this is what we really have done with Shahada. And we saw that, yes, we interface it with the UAE Pass. We saw there's a lot of collaboration, and we ensured that what we're doing using open standard, because the one thing we don't want to do is that we actually make things close and it's not there. It is very much vendor agnostic, and we can actually design it for the workflow that we really need in there. Now, talking about it, yes, it can be, it's a hybrid solution where we can put it on the cloud. It can be also be on premises, but we do looking forward. We think the cloud is the way that we are going to. Now, talking about it, have we done it? Yes. July 6th of this year, we produced more than 155 credentials. All the higher colleges certificate have been published in there. Moving from there to August 18, where we wanted to try to make sure, are we actually doing the right thing, that we became an efficient player recognized by Gartner. The higher colleges were in the government entities, so we went to the private sector with the Dubai University. We were able to try to put more than 2,000 graduates e-credentials as well using the blockchain. The journey of the blockchain does not really stop. It's not only about when you are actually going to school and going to university and all your credentials are verified, but also when you go outside and you are working, because you still continue that you really need to move and make sure all your future credential, whether you are going to a conference or you are actually going for any kind of professional certificate, and to make sure that that professional certificate is also secure. So we worked on December 11, we worked with the Internal Audit Association. Well, all of their, what they call, their certificate was also published using the blockchain. So this is really more of what we thought we can be a small brick in the overall ecosystem. But with this, we hope that, if you have any more question, please feel free to contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for your inputs and clarifications. Indeed, we assume that now the dialogue is set, and we have some questions. Actually, the first question is there a danger that regulation of artificial intelligence can act as a barrier to innovation in artificial intelligence? And then the second part in the question, what is or should be the appropriate balance? And Mr. Eric, I think that this question is for you.
Thank you very much also for the very interesting presentations, and I agree that we should certainly perhaps do more in bridging, as Pēteris said, AI and blockchain, that are two very important and complementary technologies. So on your question, of course, this is the big question, and I think this is also the spirit of what I had put into the poll today, in a way, is to say, do we need to have regulation? Where should we regulate, if at all? Can the industry self-regulate? This is of course one option. So we don't. The last thing we want at European level is, of course, to have something that will kill innovation. And if you like, this is the big discussion today and the big dilemma. So we are trying to walk this very, very fine line, and we believe that it is possible to achieve, because we know that there are some very serious issues related to AI. I mean, as we all said, big hopes and big opportunities, but we know also that in terms of safety, in terms of fundamental right, there are some AI opens up new avenues for risks that we need to address. So the approach that we have taken is, or that we will propose, and that we have already in a way analyzed in our white paper and in the consultation, is that we think that there is a way to go for a risk-based approach, that where you would say there are some very risky application areas. Some of them are quite obvious. If you take transport, autonomous driving, for example, or health. Some others are, of course, much more difficult, because you may have some applications of AI that may seem to be quite benign. But if you think about the power of AI, the power of networks, that could lead you to very serious implications, whether you're talking about media platforms or such. There are other examples. So we need to find this right balance. That's what we are looking for. But we think also that having trustworthy AI is contributing also to making sure that that companies have the legal certainty and have the trust that they need in order to go on the market. So we need to find this way, and we are hopeful that we can find it. Now, of course, the devil is in the details, so we'll need to see first. The first question is how to specify which areas are more risky than others. There are different options there. We could have this in the law. We could have other type of mechanisms that might be more flexible. That will be open for the next step of discussion as well. But I think we are pretty confident that this will be the way. We are getting inspiration, of course, from work that, for example, has been done in Germany. There was a very important data commission that did some related work with analysis also of risk levels and so on. We are also watching very carefully what is happening in international areas. I think Andreas mentioned GPI, which is for us, of course, a very important, although it's just starting, so we need to see, but it's a very important forum. There is also very interesting work in the OECD One AI group, in particular, one working group on classification of AI systems, where I think we have some of the best people who can contribute to finding these balances and how to specify these AI systems. So as also I think Mariam mentioned, one big question is the definition of AI. So of course we need to be very clear on what we are talking about, especially in a legal framework. So a lot of questions, but we are looking for the answers, and we are happy to maybe launch a deeper discussion with some partners in the UAE in order to exchange some views and maybe some experience.
Thank you so much. And we have another question, and I guess it's for you too, which is, how does the AI support infrastructure in the EU compared to that of other industry-leading countries such as the US?
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to monopolize the answers here. I'm sure that some other colleagues want to contribute to that.
Yes, we do have, but I compiled them by speakers. So.
All right. So AI infrastructure in the US compared to the US. That's the question. Well, I think of course we have. We are in a very tough competition with the rest of the world. The US is very well positioned. That's for sure in AI. But I think one of the speakers had some very interesting. I think it was a gentleman from the German association, Mr. Abbou, who had some data and some slides about. Sorry, there is some noise there. So about comparison and this kind of infrastructure comparisons, but and also especially about the B2B versus B2C. I think it's very clear, and I think Andreas also mentioned that it's very clear that we see Europe as having very, very strong assets on the B2B side. We have a very strong business base. It's true that the B2C area has been monopolized in a way, or has been already, a lot of it has been taken, of course, by the countries that have very large social media platforms that have a lot of data. This is true for the US, it's true for China as well. But we see that the next battle, if you like, or the next area of with very strong potential is the next wave in AI, which will move to industry, to services, etc. And we think we have a lot of assets to make some, to be in a very strong position there. Infrastructure is of course very important. As I mentioned in my presentation, we have big plans there as well to build up infrastructure, whether in terms of high performance computing, in terms of testing facilities, in terms of data spaces as well. So we will have funding mechanisms that were just agreed as part of the Digital Europe program, a new program on infrastructure. And the idea is there to federate and to have critical mass in all the different application areas, whether health or whether transport or other areas, and to have data spaces that are shared that give us the critical mass we need for AI. So that's what I would say now. But I think we have very strong assets in Europe, and the future is bright.
So much. I now have a question to Dr. Abdelrahman. And the question is, when it comes to artificial intelligence, there is an uncertainty/fear among the wider group of society, especially those who are less tech-affine, and this is applicable in many countries. The question, what kind of initiatives do you see essential to reduce this negative perception? And where do you see, or to whom lies the responsibility for these initiatives?
You know, this is a very good question, and it ties into the answer that Mr. Eric was providing. Let me just touch upon the, let's say, high-risk applications of AI, because fear also stems from those applications, right? It's one of those questions that it's very easy to, it's more of a discussion, right? It's very easy to start answering it, but the more you dig into it, the more technical and wide it becomes. But I think well, I'm not sure, but we might all agree that cyber physical systems are inherently high-risk applications for AI, right? So you have systems that reside purely in the cyberspace, and then you have AI systems that control things in the physical space as well, right? You have autonomous cars, you have surgical robots, and so on. So those that are cyber physical are high risk, in my opinion. Now, the main way to battle fear, I mean, the COVID scenario was a perfect example of transitioning fear of AI from something that's going to steal our jobs to something that is actually helping put everybody back into their offices, right? So one other way to battle this is education, right? So educating the public on what is really AI. It's not that evil. Fear comes from, I would venture to say, ignorance, or not fully understanding what is this technology. There is a lot of science fiction around this, and a lot of expectations that might be not realistic in the, at least in the foreseeable future, right? So education is number one on that, and I believe that education that is, let's say, led by government entities that are aiming to educate the public, not just the young tech savvy, but the older population. And this is a segment that we've seen are most affected by COVID, right? So they are the old people that are unable to go outside because of the dangers that are associated with COVID. So I hope that answers the question. But
thank you. It really did. So Mr. Andreas, would you like to add something on this question? And I also have a question for you.
What is the question for me, please?
Okay, so in which fields should European government and the UAE government cooperate more closely on AI and blockchain? And is there anything we can learn from each other?
Well, I think Pēteris Zilgalvis already said that with the European Blockchain Partnership, we're open for international cooperation. On the same, in the same moment, we have to say that, as Pēteris said, we're still maturing the use cases. We want the first use case on self-sovereign identities to be operational next year. So I think we see this perspective of more closer international cooperation in blockchain. And I think Pēteris already mentioned that now in AI, I think that also applies for blockchain, of course. We have to really facilitate the exchange of companies and businesses with each other. The federal government's approach is not to dictate company collaboration, you know, but of course we can have any kind of formats to exchange policies and to have fora for, you know, bringing together experts and businesses. So I think there is a lot of, and as you, I think in your introduction mentioned, Leyla, that we will have these talks on the Industry 4.0, Industry 4.0. We will have a bilateral exchange, Germany and the Emirates. So these are great opportunities for a bilateral cooperation. But also there are many formats for multilateral cooperation in ATBA when it comes to blockchain, GPAI when it comes to to AI. So I think there are already existing fora for multilateral exchange, and we're looking forward to intensifying our already existing bilateral exchange. I didn't want to bypass the question that was mentioned before. Just wanted to know which question additionally was mentioned. Now, I would say when it comes to fears on regulation and risks to AI, well, you know, I think, and we don't want to water down potential risks, but I think we have to be rational. A lot of the fears when it comes to AI are, you know, they have a lot to do with the representation of artificial intelligence in media, and a lot of that is based on science fiction, not on reality, not on facts. And you know, we're currently, there's a debate on GPT-3 if there's something like a general intelligence, not only what we have today, an AI model that is capable of solving one problem and is trained for one problem. But you know, with GPT-3, this general language processing, we see that that model can be trained to create text without training before on specific issues. Now, so this is why the debate is now entering a new stage on general intelligence. But what we're talking about when it comes to those fears, do we have the choice between C-3PO or the Terminator? That is still science fiction. This debate is, you know, on a very ethical level, you know, man-machine, who dominates whom. You know, a machine would not think about dominating man unless it's programmed by man to do that. And you know, this universal intelligence, I'm a bit relaxed to that, and we think we have so many issues to solve today that we should keep those debates for movies, for radio formats, and for books, and you know, for things that we do in our leisure time. But nevertheless, I hope that we will see great progress. I'm looking forward to have more AI in my work, in my daily work. I'm not afraid. I'm afraid of people who are not informed, who are disinformed on what AI is and what AI not is.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Actually, I think we are running out of time. So we would end this webinar. Do you want to add some remarks? Maybe their Excellencies ambassadors would like to add something.
I would like to say something, if I may. Peter Fischer,
Sure.
the German ambassador. Just to thank you and all the participants. I think this was a very good meeting with a lot of substance. I feel my thesis confirmed that we have something to say to each other, that we can have an interesting dialogue that advances both sides. We can learn from each other and advance together on the issues that we're working on. And again, the UAE has a big external radius. The EU does, and so does the UAE. So I really see a good potential partnership here, and would like to thank everyone very much for participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your presence and for your inputs.
Can I add something, Leyla, just quickly?
Sure.
I wanted to say that also from my point of view, this exchange shows that there are issues on which it would be beneficial for both sides to continue the cooperation. And I would just encourage my colleagues in particular on the European side to try and identify a couple of issues that were discussed today on blockchain and AI so that we can continue the conversation with our Emirati counterpart on the way to Expo. So I don't think that we should wait until Expo, as important as it is, as an event where people will convene from all over the world. But in order to make it you know, a better event and more useful for everybody, we should try and find additional moments to meet and discuss the issues that unite us. And I think that today I picked up on a couple, both on blockchain and AI and how we can work together. So I hope that we can identify these more concrete topics to strengthen and deepen our cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So just to tell you, I was really happy to moderate this event, and indeed I learned a lot. So please note that the recording is available. So if anyone would like to have a copy, please do not hesitate to contact the delegation or the German embassy. Thank you so much. And hope to see you again.
Okay, thank you. Thank you from my side. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good time.
Thanks
Stay
a lot.
healthy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Shukran, masalama. Goodbye.
Ma salama.
Bye-bye.
Shukran.
Bye-bye.